Okay, so this is just a quick demo on something that I've been experimenting with, and also as a process of learning Playwright, learning a bit more of JavaScript because I'm not really good at JavaScript and TypeScript. Um, yeah, so bear in mind that I'm not a JavaScript TypeScript expert. It's my weakest language, I think. And so I might be doing stuff that is like crazy, who knows? But yeah, so far the idea works. Um, so the point of this is that I wanted to have a way of extending base Hoover in this example, but who wants to use Luma anyways? So base Hoover tests into my site or app without having to um, copy over all the data elements. So with the current Cypress community tests that exist, one of the things I really disliked is the fact that you would clone the Cypress repo and then you had to create your own branch and go edit these data files. I've only got 3 at the moment, but you had to go edit the data files. This was in Cypress, and then when tests were changed and things got added and moved, you had to then clone again, merge it into your branch, and there would be a lot of merge conflicts. Either I was doing something wrong, or but after a few months, yeah, I had so many merge conflicts that it eventually becomes to a point where you abandon the original because you've extended and changed it so much that there's no way to pull in new base tests cleanly. And that's what I wanted to achieve here. So to give an overview of what's happening here is, let's start with the package.json in my PPS folder. So PPS is PVC Pipe Supplies, which is a website that I manage. So not the config, I've got the package.json, and you'll see that there's 2 bits here. Uh, it sets the app name and it sets a test base and an environment, and then just runs the test, and it does it again, but this time there is no test base because the test base will default to the app name if not populated. So what that does, if you look at the Playwright config file, it will load in tests according to what is set for the test base or just default to the local test folder. Okay, so that's in both of them. So that is where those environment variables come in. Plus the app environment variable comes into the fact that when tests are run, so you'll see for example my pages in the home page, I have got dynamic includes. So what the dynamic includes will do is it will see if a JSON data file exists for a specific app, and then import that data for that specific app to be used with the tests, or default through to its own backtick data, so its own local one. So in that case it would have gone to these over here. Then another thing that I've done is that the fixtures over here in my app extend the Hoover fixtures. So I've added Hoover as a I'm not sure what the term is, but I've added it over here as a path, so it's easily accessible everywhere and you don't have to back ticks and go along with all the necessary paths. So Hoover, it's just something I added to make life easier. So my test fixture extends the Hoover test fixtures. Now the Hoover test fixtures would load in specific pages. For example, let's look at the home page. So it will load in the Hoover home page, and it will then exstantiate that over here as a page to be used within the tests. And then my PPS one extends that and can override that with a custom one, because my site has got a custom home page where the where I've got extra tests functions. For example, where is the page? My site has got a category list on the home page. This extends the home page from the Hyva test, so it pulls in all the functions that's available, like navigate to can search from home page, but I'm also overriding the can search from home page, which is, yeah, because my homepage search is slightly different to the default Hyva one. I don't have the click on the non-mobile. That's basically the difference there. So if we run this, so the end result basically is that I can add tests and functions to my app's test pages without overriding or making any changes to the Hyva base. So I can, for example, add in my own tests, which is a completely test that doesn't exist in Hyva, and I can add in functions or tests that don't exist in Hyva, and I can override tests that exists in Hyva. So to show you this in practice, so let's swap over to the console, and I will, for example, run the tests from the base Hyva, and now what will happen is those will load in the Hyva tests, and now the Hyva tests are defined here, and the config.json is pointing to the Hyva demo store, and it's loading everything self-contained as the Hyva site, so everything is there, and it's running these tests, which is, for example, the home page, verify home page. So it's doing all the Hyva based tests, like let's say this is community driven tests. Stop doing that. Okay, and there it's finished running all of the Hyva tests. So these are the tests available within the Hyva base framework. Now I've extended on that, and I can, for example, say run the PPS tests, and you'll see it will run all those tests, but it will be using my site's data files and my site's configuration, and also if I want to my site's locators, and that's without having made any changes again to the Hyva. So I can cleanly clone this and keep this up to date to whatever is in the base GitHub repo. This could be a child GitHub repo, so cloned into here from itself, so completely self-contained and separate from the base, and it's cleaner, and just in my opinion. So there you can see that it had finished the base Hyva test. It had skipped the search for the home page. I'll get to how I do that, because I've extended that and I've replaced that with my own test, because my test differs for my site. So that's currently running a separate test that is for Shipper HQ. So it takes a little bit longer because my local environment is not too fast. Yeah, and now it is running cart actions. So even though there's cart actions over there, I've got separate cart actions, which in this case is to clear the shopping cart, which don't exist in the base Hyva. But I've also managed to test from the base Hyva all the base Hyva functionality on my site without having had to make edits to the base Hyva. That's the whole key to this idea. And there we go. So yes, there's two separate tests that run, one for all the base tests and another one for my site's custom tests. I'm okay with that, because if they had run as one continuous test, the time would have been the same. These will fail, those will fail. So yeah, that's basically the idea that I've had, is to be able to have a base Git repo with Hyva tests without having to make any changes in that, layer my site on top of that, use my site's data points, but with Hyva's base tests that were community driven or built. I can also extend the locators, so you could basically just, if you look at my home test, you can decide where you want to load your locators from, or you can do whatever you want really, just including I've got my locators coming from my environment because I have made changes. So some of the locators are custom, which would be where is my locators there? No, that's the home page. Where's the locators there? That's because I've got the category grids and the category grid divs extra, which don't exist within the locators for the base Hyva. So yeah, I feel this makes it quite nice and extensible. It's a first try. I've spent the last week figuring this out because I am not a JavaScript expert, but so far it seems pretty stable. You can, for example, also go and run cd source app pps, and you can, for example, do that and run individual tests. Yeah, or you can push it through the UI so that you can work on it and debug on it if necessary, and it just makes it easier to work on. It's easier to switch it off, make it headless. But yeah, you can also then individually work on stuff. Now I can very easily just swap that out to become a Hyva test by changing that to Hyva. As you can see, different tests. But it will run from my site because it's using my site's configuration, because I've set the app name to be PPS. Now if you want to work, that one failed because that's the one that I'm skipping due to the fact that my search is slightly different, so that's expected to fail. Or I can just go and make this a... I don't know if I need to be in the Hyva folder for this to work. That would be interesting to see. No, I don't. Look at that. And now it's on a Hyva site, but it's using the same tests. No edits made, and that will obviously not pass. That's what I've been working on. I've pushed it up to a Git repo, which I'll put in the text. I'm open to ideas. I've done certain, I might have done things that is, holy fuck Lucas, you can't do shit like that. But yeah, like I said, I'm not an expert in JavaScript or TypeScript, so I've been plodding my way through and figuring the shit out, and I've learned a lot about Playwright, fixtures, extending everything. So it's been a pleasurable experience and also frustrating at some point. The thing I dislike the most, and I'm not sure if there's a good way of doing it, because I am extending this test, but I'm extending the actual page object. So I am extending the page object from, where is the page? So this home page is extending the Hyva home page, which is giving me the ability to change this actual test. The problem is that the Hyva test spec still has that test. So if it runs the second run, so wherever if it runs the second run, if I can just run through that again, yeah, or the first run, then it will fail because that while that runs, because when it's running the Hyva app, this home page spec will load this page because it will use this fixture. Okay, so I needed to find a way to skip the test, and you'll see that come on, go away, all the base tests have to start with this. And what that does is it checks to see a variable placed within my app's config, which is the base tests that I would like to skip. And if you name a base test in that, it will get skipped when it's run so that I don't have a failure. So to show you what will happen, let's just go and get all that out. That there will fail because it will be running on PPS, and that search does not work on PPS from there, from that fixtures. So I'd be interested to know if anyone knows of a better way of doing this to somehow get this, test spec, to extend that test spec. I'm not too sure if I'm explaining that right, but yeah, this is the idea. I've pushed it up to the repo. People can have a look if they want to. I'm going to be using this more and more going forward in the next couple of weeks, so it might still change. Anyways, that's what I've been keeping myself busy with, and it's been an interesting experience. Cool. Cheers.